Good evening. This is the agenda setting session for the Planning Commission meeting, which will occur this evening at 6 o'clock. This is that time when commissioners have discussion or get questions answered or information that they feel is needed for them to be ready to make decisions during the meeting. So we will talk about the three applications that we have for tonight. The first one is a preliminary planned development at 145 Decal Drive. So,
okay, and as we normally do, I'll do all of these with you. Just a little housekeeping to start. Tonight, for the meeting purposes, Aaron Hall will be doing all of the staff presentations. We do also have Robin, who is here with us, who worked on the Oconee Street item, if you have questions on that one as well. First item, 145 Decal Drive, and with all these are all preliminary PDs tonight, so you will take no votes on any of them. They're all comments only, and we'll come back probably at your July meeting. 145 Decal Drive is a preliminary PD amendment. This is an amendment to the original Lakewood PD that probably goes back into 04, 03. I mean, it's an older PD. This particular area was originally approved for fairly high density townhome development and residential. What the applicant is asking to do is to amend that PD to propose kind of an agricultural based event center on the property that would involve, the event facility that would be a converted barn that is existing on site now, along with some additional amenity space outside, an agricultural base across the property that would be active farming and livestock within limitations. And then also, I think it's about a dozen houses that would be used for those event purposes for bridesmaids, those types of things, over a weekend event. So from staff standpoint, just really looking for a lot of additional information at this point in terms of details. Josh Coons, I think, will be presenting this one on behalf of Shane Decal. Any questions?
I had one question about parking. I just want to be sure that I understand what's in the application. It says that a number of the spaces will be street parking, and I was really unclear. And they have numbers here, but I want to be sure I understand. It says the parking lots consist of 71 spaces, is 17 of which are already on Decal Drive. So the 71 spaces, I went there today to try to make sure that I understood this, and I couldn't determine where the parking would all be located. Can you help me with that?
The majority of the parking on this one, honestly, will be that special event type of parking that is on an unimproved pasture that you see there kind of to the bottom right of the overall plan. There is available public parking along Decal Drive in the form of on-street parallel, as well as some driveway parallel parking on the new entrance drive proposed on either side of that driveway. That's about it.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then one other thing, has he said anything about phasing? Or do we know anything about how he's going to phase it?
We do not. Again, that's a great question to ask Mr. Coons tonight in regard to it.
I have that down, so I didn't know.
Okay. Okay. Well, if there are no other questions, we'll move on to 2015 West Broad. Again, preliminary plan development. For those of you old timers that have been around for a while, you've seen this property before in different forms and fashions. This is the corner of West Broad Street and Kalima. They are asking to rezone from, well, it's a land use change from traditional neighborhood to general business and from commercial general and RS8 to a commercial general plan development. Yeah, the proposed use is quick vehicle servicing on the property. There is a little bit of existing commercial general across the frontage, but is really limited on this property. And so the request would be to retain one residential lot at the southern end of the overall parcel, but the balance of it be put into a PD to extend the commercial general down Kalima to do the quick vehicle servicing, which in this case is it's a drive-in oil change facility on the property. So, you know, again, preliminary plan developments, there are some waivers. We do anticipate having at least one member of the public in attendance in the auditorium that will speak during the public comment period upon completion of, I think Bob Smith is going to present this one on behalf of Ken Dias for Smith Planning Group.
So, Brad, I was curious, like, how does something get to this point to begin with? Like, how does something get this kind of dual zoning on it like this?
I would like that.
Yeah, I think this is a product of probably the 80s, Kristen, in terms of, we used to have a lot of the strip corridor development. And in this case, most of that strip commercial development along the corridors back in the 80s and early 90s was a distance measurement off the right of way, either 200 or 300 feet, and it would just split properties. I think probably in the case of this one, because Mr. Dias's property is so minimal of commercial general, where some of the other ones have more, that it's probably a product of him not, having concerns of giving up that little bit of commercial he's got. There is a billboard up on that corner too that, if we were to convert that property completely to single family, it would have impacted the legality of the billboard. It would have still been legal but non-conforming. So I think this is just a product. This split zoning in its current configuration probably goes back 40 years and it's never changed.
I was looking at these this week and said, this is my 10th year on the Planning Commission, and I don't recall, perhaps there have been, somebody might know, I don't remember split zoned properties in decisions in the 10 years. And tonight we have multiples.
We try very hard to avoid them, and we certainly don't like creating them, and we don't have to anymore. But in the case of this one, if this PD were to be approved, it would eliminate the split zone from a standpoint. They would, that rear RS8 lot would be subdivided as a separate standalone building lot. I think probably if there are staff concerns at this point, and you'll hear them during the presentation too, is just, it's a plan development. What is the potential impact on those first 3 or 4 houses that are rather newly built along Kalima, in terms of they're directly across a residential street from service doors to an auto change place. In terms of screening, traffic impact, cars that are idling, those are the types of things that I think we will be asking Mr. Smith to address further when he brings back a master plan. Okay. Well, we'll move on to the third and last item for this evening is 594 Oconee Street. Again,
are you doing them in the order that is on the agenda, or what?
This is the order on my agenda. Yes, Decal, Broad, Oconee.
Okay. Yeah, it is. Excuse me. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. This is currently a special use in commercial general and RM2 airport overlay. This was one that we looked at a few years back for purposes of converting the old school to residential under a tax credit for historic structures. It was approved accordingly. That evidently has not occurred for varying reasons, and so the owner is coming in asking to rezone what is, I guess, the rear of the property as you see it from Oconee Street there. back to a residential use. That was with the original special use permit, an amenity area and some additional parking for the residential that would be built. To basically subdivide that property off into its own lot for purposes of building a single family and a duplex structure on the property under the RM2 designation, which would be allowed as it's a multifamily use with those two structure types. And then the school and the annex property would be converted from the residential it received approval for to an office use. There are waivers associated with this in a lot of areas that we'll go through as part of our presentation with you tonight. I will tell you, and it's one of the things that we pointed out in our report to them, probably my biggest concern at this point with it is the phasing, because we don't know the phasing, and what I would certainly have concerns with is this is approved as a PD, the rear acre worth of property is subdivided off, sold, those two houses built, nothing more ever happens with the property, and the school continues to be in disrepair. Under this type of a plan development, I think what we will probably be recommending as part of the master is a condition that the work to the school and annex must be completed before you can build those two houses or the 3 units behind it. Again, that's just a staff recommendation. It may be interesting to have that conversation this evening with the applicant to see what their intention is. But again, preliminary PD comments only. I would stress to all of you guys with these 3, these are not basic, simple plan developments. And so any and all comments that we can get to the applicants will be very beneficial as they continue to move forward.
Brad, what could the applicant on Oconee Street do without, as of right, with the property right now? Could they build those multifamilies in the back?
I mean, they could. They can't build the multifamily without airport approval because it's in the overlay. The biggest thing is that what's driving the waiver is they can't subdivide that lot in the back for purposes of selling it because there's a minimum parcel size in an airport overlay that they're asking for an exception to. As far as the office use goes, they could do that by right today without any further approval. There may be some issues with variances and things that may be needed, but then that would be a hearings board more than it would be necessarily plan development. The approval of the old special use in order to allow them to build residential a few years ago, as with all of these special uses, it is a use in addition to those otherwise permitted. So it did not lock down the property from any other permitted use under CG zoning. It just added the residential use as an additional option, of which they were not able to follow through with.
Okay, so they could build multifamily right now, but they just couldn't subdivide that portion off and sell it to someone else. Is that correct? Or could they not even build the multifamily?
If you look at the site plan on that back part that they're wanting to subdivide off, and you see a diagonal dashed line that goes through the 4-bedroom unit, it's the airport approach line. Anything to the left of that line, they could put multifamily on. The stuff to the right is within the airport approach and would not be permitted.
Gotcha.
So the bottom line is they could not put as much residential as they are asking for. Is that correct? By right? I think Brad's.
That's correct. Yeah. The airport is actually, I'm looking on my map here. It's everything to the left of that diagonal is in the approach, not to the right.
Brad, is this the same owner as that came to us a couple years back was working on the tax credit application and everything, or is this a different owner? Do you remember?
I do not know. It's hard to tell because these all come in under LLCs.
Yeah, I was just curious.
It's a different owner.
Is it?
I learned that, yes. Same builder, and then the same group that would manage the residences would have managed the apartments in the school building. To me, the bigger difference here is that that original plan that we approved, there were some gives and takes with that, some things that we had to grant waivers for. But it was one it was one development. Everything went together. What we have here is two, we have split zoning and we have split development. We have residential development hooked on to commercial.
Okay. I don't know there's a need to give additional subcommittee reports at the end, but I'll defer to you, Madam Chair.
Matt, have you all met since last Thursday?
Yes, we met 2 days ago, and there's not that much to report. I can give a 60-second report, or I can not give a 60-second report. And
why don't we just hold it and report at our next regular meeting? Does that suit you all okay?
yeah, I think that's fine. In all likelihood, we will circulate a written report to you guys. We're drafting it now. It's at the draft stage, but it'll be done before the next planning commission meeting. I think so. In all likelihood, we'll send you a memo to bring you up to speed on where we are and give you guys a chance to comment and so on before the next meeting.
Do you want to say that in the meeting, Matt? That might be helpful to say in the meeting. Why don't we just do that?
Okay.
For
And
what
then
it's,
yeah.
if you don't mind, I wanted to, I got an email earlier today from Chris Dowd, and he was asking about the housing subcommittee and if there would be a report. I wasn't sure what he had heard. I just told him how the two subcommittees had formed, and I wasn't sure if there was going to be a report tonight or not, and I basically told him as much. So I don't know if he's planning on listening, but I mean, it might be worth to just maybe give a short recap if he is listening, because he was interested in learning more about the subcommittee. So,
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to give a quick report on at a high level of generality what we've been working on and what the status is.
Good. And then Brad, were you able to set up the meetings for our group for next week?
Yes, and those invitations should be coming. They're probably going to be coming from Rick. The same way you get them from me for these meetings, it'll be coming to you from Rick. And he has already talked to the two engineers, and they're on board.
Then Lucy, do you want to just say that, and we'll then have both of those things in the record?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, that's great.
Okay. Well, all right. There's nothing else. We actually will exit out of this meeting and then rejoin. I'm gonna jump right back over and turn it on. We will rejoin for television at 6 o'clock.
Okay, thank you. See you all.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Maxine Eastham. I chair the Planning Commission for Athens-Clarke County. We welcome you to the May 14th meeting of the Athens-Clarke County Planning Commission. In response to the state of emergency in Georgia regarding COVID-19 or coronavirus, this meeting is being held via a WebEx online meeting platform, which is being broadcast on YouTube and Athens-Clarke TV cable channel 180. Members of the public have been given a chance to provide recorded comment on specific agenda items prior to noon today. Members of the public were also provided the opportunity to email comments to the planning department prior to noon today. We have received some. Finally, members of the public may also address the Planning Commission in real time via electronic communication provided in the auditorium at 120 West Doherty Street, subject to safe distancing measures. And I believe there are some people there. For those of you viewing the meeting remotely, you will find the meeting agenda on the Planning Department's website at www.acc.gov, Athens-Clarke County Gov.com/planning. For those of you viewing the meeting from the auditorium, on the table outside of the auditorium door, you will find copies of tonight's agenda, a sign-in sheet, and political campaign contribution disclosure forms for those wishing to speak in opposition to an agenda item before the mayor and commission. After staff presentation of an agenda item, we will receive public comment, first from the applicant, then from those in the auditorium, and then we will hear any public comment that were recorded earlier, and I believe there were none. 10 minutes are allowed to address the commission for the applicant or their representative, and also for any specific interest group representative who has requested additional time prior to the meeting. 3 minutes are allowed for anyone else who wishes to address the commission. After public comment, the applicant or their representative may request a 2-minute response. Once the public hearing is closed, the Planning Commission will proceed to discuss and act on the item. We will receive no additional public comment unless requested by the Commission. When addressing the Commission from the auditorium, please speak from the designated place as directed by the staff who is present there in the auditorium. For all speakers, please provide your name, your address, and your occupation for the record. For those in the auditorium, a timer device will display an amber light 30 seconds before the expiration of the allotted time and a red light upon expiration of the allotted time. So please pay attention to the light so I don't have to interrupt you. For those addressing the commission remotely, you will also be expected to adhere to the specified time limit. Exhibits may be displayed by the applicants remotely or at the auditorium podium. Written correspondence received by noon today has been forwarded to the commission and is already a part of the public record. I will be a part of the public record. As additional written materials to be placed into the record must be read during public comment within the time limits previously stated. Please direct your comments to the Planning Commission and not to the applicants. And for those of you in the auditorium, please refrain from applauding or jeering any of the speakers. For everyone participating in the evening's meeting, please turn off or silence your cell phone. For commission members or anyone else who is in our using the WebEx program, please mute your microphone if you are not speaking. Use the chat box if you have any technical issues, and raise your hand to the camera if you'd like to speak, and please wait to be recognized. Remember that this meeting is being recorded. That's all of our directions. I hope we all got all of those. And we will now move into the agenda. For those who may have wondered why we are having two meetings back to back, we were have missed some opportunities for meeting because of the coronavirus. And so now that we are meeting online and have that availability, our efforts are to be caught up and get decisions made in as timely a fashion as we can. So that's why we had a meeting last week and another meeting this week. I would like first, please, to see if there is someone who would like to introduce staff reports and all other documents submitted to the Planning Commission for this meeting into the official record.
So move.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please let it be known by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? All right, moving on. Mr. Griffin, do we have any May courts review or public comment?
No report tonight.
All right, then we are going to move immediately into, well, let me say, we will not be approving the minutes of last week's meeting. We will wait and approve both sets of minutes at our regular meeting, the first Thursday of June. All right, now we will move to our agenda items. We have 3 agenda items tonight. I want to say before we begin that all of these items are preliminary requests for preliminary plan developments or a plan development amendment. We will not be voting whether or not to recommend this to the mayor and commission at this meeting tonight. These are being brought for the applicant to get thoughts from planning commissioners as they move forward with putting their application together. So our first application is 145 Decal Drive. Call this up. Case number PD 2020-02-686, 145 Decal Drive. The purpose of this request is to amend an existing PD at 145 Decal Drive. So, is our applicant ready to, no, excuse me, I'm sorry. Is our staff member ready to share with us the plan?
Yes, I'll share that now.
All right ahead.
All right, again, this is an amendment to a PD. This is at 145 Decal Drive, PD 2020-02-686. Here is an aerial view of the parcel. Is showing the parcel again. Here's the zoning on the parcel. To the north is single-family residential. There are 2 single-family residential RS8 parcels to the west of it, along with some mixed-density residential. And here's existing zoning showing that it is a commercial neighborhood plan development. And the future development will stay the same, traditional neighborhood. The request is an amendment to a commercial neighborhood plan development. It is compatible again with the traditional neighborhood future land use designation. It is 1 parcel at 7.46 acres. It's to revise the use and density of the site. The request includes a binding site application report, site plan, and representative architectural elevations as to guarantee the community that development of the property would match the proposal. There are 8 requested variances. Number 1, an allowance to use standard gravel construction with permanent edging for proposed private street and parking lot in lieu of required public street construction standards for non-residential uses. Number 2, an allowance to eliminate sidewalks on both sides of the proposed private street. An allowance to eliminate street trees along proposed private street. An allowance to reduce required canopy coverage from 15% to 0%. An allowance to reduce required canopy coverage from 45% to 0%. An allowance to use a 9-foot tall perimeter fencing in lieu of 8-foot tall perimeter fencing. An allowance to eliminate minimum outdoor pedestrian lighting of 1/2 foot candle for commercial neighborhood zone. And an allowance to eliminate the requirement for a public plaza in large-scale developments involving 60,000 square feet of gross floor area or more in the commercial neighborhood zone. Here is the binding site plan that we have on record. It is a little messy, but if you notice, to the west of the green space, there were and proposed condo apartments to the included in that is a large section of parking. Here is the proposed site plan. Here are the proposed architectural elevations. The upper ones are for the rental cottage and the office. The bottom one is for rental cabins of 750 to 1,200 square feet. And then the honeymoon cabin, which is proposed to be 1,000 to 1,400 square feet. Staff comments. It is the planning department's main concern that a special events and agricultural use will be directly adjacent to single-family residences. Number 2, agriculture is not permitted use in the commercial neighborhood zone. However, the use, according to the applicant, will be primarily for agriculture, includes the keeping of animals. Though the application report states that the use will be primarily for agriculture, there should be a greater degree of design to keep the use separate from the single-family uses surrounding the property. Care should be taken to keep noise and smells away from the single-family homes and the established residents surrounding Lakewood. Waivers should be requested for agricultural uses in the CN zone. And though not a hotel or a bed and breakfast, a waiver should recognize the limitations of an overnight use in the commercial neighborhood zone. The limitation for a hotel in commercial neighborhood zone would be more than 10,000 square feet of hotel floor area per parcel. The sum of the individual rental cottages exceeds the 10,000 square feet. Furthermore, tree canopy is an issue as stated by the arborist in the report. It could help with the trees, it could help reduce smell and noise, especially if trees are planted on the periphery of the parcel or abutting the residential properties. The proposed mesh fence along the residential zone boundary does not comply with Section 9-15-3 buffer and screening standards. The requested waiver of required public plaza for projects of 60,000 square feet appears to be unnecessary since the site plan denotes 55,000 square feet for the total building area. And number 4, the proposed use would not meet several of the special event facility standards recently incorporated into the code, such as the requirement for event-related traffic to use on an arterial or collector street, the prohibition of overnight rentals, commercial kitchens and restaurants, and the limitation of hours of operation. Lastly, the ACC arborist has identified in the environment section of the report several issues with the requested tree canopy waivers that should be resolved with the master plan submittal. ADA parking should be provided adjacent to the office and cottages, and the service emergency road needs to be wider and must be designed to support the apparatus weight of emergency vehicles. And here is the proposed site plan, and thus concludes the staff report.
Thank you very much. And now we will hear from the applicant. Mr. Coons, are you making that presentation?
Yes, ma'am. Can you all hear me okay?
We can.
Okay, great. So my name is Josh Coons. I reside at 205 Clover Street here in Athens. And the Decal family approached our firm to assist them with this PD amendment. And if you know the Decal family, they've been in town for, gosh, almost 90 years now, and are deeply invested and care immensely about the Athens community. They also care immensely about their family property. And as you all know, the Lakewood neighborhood was ultimately developed by them. And as the neighborhood has been slowly in phases of construction over the years since about 2004, the family ultimately started to prefer to preserve the history of the farm and where they could, and maintain some of the rural aesthetic in the property that they still own. The idea of keeping the farm and the barn relative to some of the condo apartments that were originally designed for this location is kind of an interesting idea, especially along this corridor that has been sort of designated for dense development. So the tract in question that we are requesting the amendment for is a 7.5 acre tract that was a working horse farm, really from the early 1960s up until about 1995. So, you know, agriculture and even livestock animals is something that has existed here at one point in time for quite a while. The primary intent, though, of this request is ultimately to create a working urban farm that can be a source for locally grown products. I think everybody's familiar with CSAs. We have a number of them around here. But this one would actually be something that would be in town. The farm operations would be supplemented by an event facility with short stay housing, so that it could ultimately become a destination location. Many of you, again, might be familiar with some of these that have been popping up a lot in urban areas specifically, and are sort of a nice alternative for weddings and family gatherings. And so it ultimately becomes something that is kind of unique and potentially a draw for not only Athens residents, but visitors to Athens alike. The three uses, the agriculture, the event, and the lodging, ultimately kind of dependent on each other to make an idea like this work. And so I think that's just one of those things we kind of want to keep in mind as we start to think about how they work together and how we might want to try to modify the request in response to comments. But it's kind of nice, again, thinking about where we are on this corridor in Barnett Shoals, to have something like this that might be just 2 miles from downtown Athens. So while everybody's familiar with the farms that are around town, having something in town is kind of nice. And if you are familiar with the Williams farm off of Ruth Street, it's a good example of an in-town urban farm. We helped the land trust with that many years ago, and that farm has really been thriving ever since, and really kind of an asset to the neighborhood as a result. There are a number of examples, like I mentioned, of these sort of event facility farms in our area. Love is Love Farm in Decatur is a great example of what we're trying to create. There's another farm in Loganville called the Wrecking Barn Farm, which is actually an offshoot of the Wrecking Bar restaurant in Atlanta. That is another great example of what this could be. So I think there's a unique opportunity here that we're really looking forward to getting your input on. There's a lot of waivers associated with this request. Ultimately, these waivers are kind of requested to assist with maintaining the rural feel, the aesthetic of the farm, while providing flexibility for farming operations. Some of these are straightforward, like the fencing height request, which is something that would help keep deer out. Some are more based on aesthetics, such as using gravel and eliminating the typical streetscape elements so that we can have a drive that feels a little bit more like it belongs to the farm and not so much the traditional neighborhood outside of the farm perimeter. And some are about operations. The tree canopy request ultimately are there to maximize the potential for pastures, crops, things like that. Hard to kind of, just read when you see that on the screen, I'll be honest. But I think when you wrap it up into the idea of what a farm is and how it operates, they tend to make sense. I do recognize and want to be mindful of the neighbors in close proximity to the farm. Many were there actually when this was a working horse farm. So, I think that, again, the agricultural use may not be something that's completely foreign, but the event facility and the timing of those uses is something that we definitely recognize, that adhering to the noise ordinance and making sure that people can come and go adequately from the property is something we're very, very aware of. Limitations on livestock, similar to what we did with the Williams farm, is also something that we noted in the report to make sure that there are ways to limit noise and smells if that's a concern from the agricultural operations. And we do recognize that the deer-proof fencing is not adequate in areas where we do have adjacent residents close by. We can certainly address that with some refinements to the application. So in closing, I just want to encourage you, if you're not familiar with some of these urban farms, and especially the ones that are kind of unique event facilities, I would certainly encourage you to research them, learn more about them. They tend to be very popular and unique facilities that communities tend to embrace. And I think we have an opportunity here, again, to create something very similar with this request that would be an asset to Athens. So with that, I will turn it back over to you. Thank you very much.
Are people in the auditorium who would like to give comment about this application?
There is one.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm great. How are you? I'm not sure where I am over there. Am I ready to go?
Yes.
My name's Shane Decal. My father and I, my father's Mike Decal. We are the ones that are submitting for the amendment to the PD. We've been in Athens for, I didn't catch Josh's the first part of his, but my family's been in Athens for close to 80 years, and we've got a vested interest in seeing this community thrive and prosper. We've done several projects in Athens over the last 20 years, and our intent with everything we've ever done is leaving Athens in a better place, a place where I'm dead and gone, and something my children's children can be proud of. And on the back end is we want to make money. So I'm not going to hide the fact that it needs to be economically viable. But my first goal with this project is to create something unique for Athens. And this farm has been in my family's name or possession since the early 60s. It was a working horse farm. At one point, there was close to 40 horses on the property. And up until 1999, the reason we got rid of the horses, I don't know if any of y'all know much about horses or boats or airplanes, they're all very similar. They're money pits, and it's a lot of maintenance, a lot of headache. They're beautiful animals. But it just didn't make sense to have a horse farm. It's just been the way it is for the last 20 years. We've done nothing with it, and would love to see it continue to be a farm. The other alternative right now is they've probably mentioned in the report, we could build 94 condominiums, 21 attached single-family residences, and 10 single-family homes. And I prefer not to see that. The easy route for us as our family would be to sell it to a student apartment developer, and then that farm would no longer be. And we hope that that's not going to be the case. We certainly want to address staff's concerns and comments as we move forward. And we want to be good stewards of the neighborhood. I live in the neighborhood, and my kids play on that property as of right now. So this is not something, again, we want to do and move on. But we do want to please as many people as we possibly can with what we're doing, and I think we can do that. I know smell was an issue in the comment section, and out of the 40 years that were horses out there, I don't ever recall there being a complaint on smell. The only complaint we ever had was horses getting in somebody's backyard up on Lexington Road. And so, we're not looking for this to be a chicken house slap full of animals or a big cattle farm or goat farm. The animals would be more aesthetic and I guess nostalgic. We're looking to create a theme, a agritourism site where people would want to come to Athens for a wedding. Could stay on site in a farm setting, but at the same time, you're 2 miles from downtown, which is great restaurants, more lodging for all your people. But that's it. We're looking to do something nice for Athens that everyone can be proud of and benefit from long term. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this application? If not, as I understand, Brad, we don't have any public comments that were recorded related to this application. That's correct.
That's correct.
All right. And so then we'll move behind the bar and discuss this among commissioners. Mr. Anderson, I see your hand. Thank you.
Yes, I think it sounds good overall, but I am concerned about the arborist comments about the lack of trees, and I think some kind of tree canopy is desirable, even if it is an issue to try to develop pastures. I'm sure you can find places where it is suitable to have trees as opposed to places where it's not.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, Ms. Kinman.
I just want to say that I think this is a really innovative and interesting use of this property. What could go up there by right is really not what's needed in that area. I don't know how many of y'all are familiar with this area. I used to represent, well, actually I didn't represent that side of Barnett Shoals, but I was very familiar with that end of Barnett Shoals. I can tell from all the waivers that are required, they're being asked for that, this kind of thing doesn't fit easily into existing urban zoning. So I guess my comment is that I would like to encourage the applicant to work really closely with staff to live this idea, this dream of an urban farm, which our zoning code doesn't really easily accommodate. I think the application is interesting, and I look forward to supporting it because I think it's a better use of the property than what could be.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Hall.
Yeah, I agree with what Jim and Alice said. I did have a little bit of concern about the tree canopy, and it wasn't obvious to me why that could not be, why more of the existing trees couldn't be conserved or trees planted elsewhere on the property. Overall, I think it's an awesome project. It seems like a really cool use of the space. And I understand the reasons for a lot of the waivers, the gravel drive to give it kind of more of an agri-tourism farm feel when it's not particularly a neighborhood. Like we have very good reasons why we don't like gravel roads and why we do like sidewalks. And for this development on this site, I'm very comfortable with waiving some of those things because it seems unnecessary. It's also, it strikes me as perhaps meaningful that we haven't heard any objections from neighbors. There's just a few neighboring parcels, and I would encourage the applicant to be sensitive in terms of fencing, trees, shrubs, etc., to protecting those neighbors from undue impact. But overall, I think it seems like a really cool project, and absolutely better for Athens than what's allowed there as of right now. So I'm very positive about the project in general, but I would encourage the applicant to think a little harder about trees and about the necessity of each of these waivers, although the necessity of some of them is certainly obvious to.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any further comments? I'm sorry.
Kristen,
I don't see Kristen, so I can't see everybody. I'm sorry. Thank you. Kristen. Ms.
Sorry.
Moran.
So yeah, question on the plan here for the driveway. Are there two entrances and exits, or is there? Because I see the entrance off Decal Drive. Is there something coming off of Edgewater Drive too? And if that might be an issue with traffic going out into the neighborhood after events and things like that.
There is access directly from Edgewater as well as to Decal Drive. It looks like there may be proposals for gates at one location there. Josh may be able to address that more clearly than I can, but there are 2 points of ingress and egress at this point.
Josh, do you have any further clarification?
There are 2 points, and that is correct. The exit or entry could be controlled for events, so that the traffic would be routed to Decal Drive. If that's, part of the objective is to make sure we get them out towards the arterial roads more quickly. But ultimately having those 2 points of entry just help facilitate access for a number of reasons beyond the event, to be honest with you. But I know that is one of the concerns that planning raised about just making sure we could get people out of there in a way that didn't put a lot of traffic into the neighborhood streets. So I think we can talk to them about that and just see how to control that in a way that works well.
Okay. Yeah, I think that was, I echo the similar comments about the trees. As someone who grew up with horses, I think it's interesting that our code kind of lumps all kind of large animals together. I see a large distinction between horses and cows, for example, but I'm a little biased. So that's kind of the end of my comments. So thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Morales. Anyone else? And Brad, help me see because I don't have a visual for everyone. Anyone else?
Lucy.
Lucy. Ms. Rowland.
Okay, I'm unmuted now. I'm very familiar with this property, been out there several times. And I echo the concerns about trees, but that's about the end of it with waivers, because I think for a facility like this, to ask them to put in paving is probably a bridge too far. That I think the gravel will work fine if you've got a properly packed substrate, and it will remove a lot of impervious surface. Impervious surface. I think it's just important to look at this as a unique piece of property with plans for doing something that is unusual for a lot of the kind of commercial development we talk about. So I'm looking forward to voting in favor of this when it comes back to us as a master plan.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Mr. Scarborough.
Yes. Whenever anybody brings a project with a long list of waivers, I get a little nervous and I start looking for reasons to think that it's a bad project. But I don't think this is a bad project. I think it's a very interesting idea. Like everybody else said, it's a unique use of the property, and it holds it more towards what it has been instead of what it could be. It's interesting to think that we're nervous about putting a very light used agricultural spot in place of a large condominium development, but they both have the same concern to me, and that's the concern that we adequate buffers between this and the neighborhood, both around the edge of the property with the adjoining properties and with traffic that may exit through the neighborhood. I would want them to make sure that we're sensitive about that. And let me just make my comment on the tree issue is, yes, the trees, lack of trees makes me nervous too. I understand if you're growing row crops, you can't do it in the shade, but if you're keeping livestock, then livestock needs shade. If you don't have trees, you're going to wind up putting up shade shelters or something like that. So I would encourage the applicant to find a way to save at least some of these trees in points where they would be useful for their planned use of animals, just so that you preserve some of the character of it and you give your animals a place to get out of the sun. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Sarah, Ms. Beresford.
Yeah, I would just I'm glad that Jeff brought up buffers because of the list of waivers. My concerns are with tree canopy and buffer. I think it's just important, and I think those things can to some extent be handled together. And I would add to the list of animals that would appreciate shade trees. I would include the humans who are going to be using the property for events. Like I was really startled by that. I think that there is a 0% in there somewhere for tree canopy, and I just can't even imagine doing that. So that would definitely be a concern I have. And then the other thing that Aaron brought up in the staff report that I just wanted to circle back to is, well, actually, let me say one other thing before I go to that. The other thing I wanted to point out is the other, in the application, in the applicant's report, they list sort of an example urban agriculture ordinance and indicate sort of the types of livestock, et cetera, allowed. And, we don't really have anything like that other than sort of the chicken ordinance that was passed some time back. And so my first question is for staff, really, do we have anything that governs types of animals because this is unique, so do we have anything that governs or limits what types of animals and how many can be on a property, like on a CNPD property, essentially? So maybe I'll ask that question and then I'll ask my other one after you guys answer that.
We don't have anything in the ordinance that governs agriculture on a CNPD. There is some limited language in our ordinance currently for the lower density residential zones as you begin to transition RS25, RS40. There are allowances for livestock. There are some restrictions, but it generally limits you to 2 head per acre of land that you have of livestock. So in this case, it would be about 15 animals. And then it also sets forth some restrictions on structures used to house said animals with some increased setbacks from property lines. But I'm not sure here in terms of total number where they're at, but there is some language that currently exists.
And do we have any limitations on bees or anything like that?
No limitations on bees.
Okay. And the reason I bring those items up is just that, this is such a unique property. So I'll just leave it at that. I just wanted to sort of make sure that honestly wondering if the applicant's going to run up against something that, or, like what I'm wondering is whether their PD needs to include a plan for that, but what I'm hearing is maybe not necessarily just whatever underlying rules would apply.
Well, and generally with the plan development, if approved, and they have set forth some language in their report, that would become the development regulation for this specific property only upon approval.
Okay. And then my, let's see. Oh, so this is sort of similar, in the sense that I know we spent a lot of time last year talking about the agriculture rural event facilities, which are kind of a different beast in the sense that they're happening in AR zoned properties. But what, if any, types of, so when we were discussing ag event facilities and AR zones, we were talking about things like ingress and egress, and I think places for trash and buffers and timing of events. And this is the first time that I'm aware of that we have seen an application like this. And so I'm wondering, do we, I know that one of the things we said about the ag event facilities and AR zones is that they couldn't have any overnight. And I have no problem with not allowing overnight in AR zones, but allowing overnight on this property. That doesn't pose a problem for me. But I'm just wondering if some of those things that we did discuss that were mostly about sort of keeping neighbors happy and event attendees safe, do we need to discuss that, or is this in such a different part of town that if people attending an event are leaving at midnight or 1 a.m, I mean, noise ordinance would apply, but if they're leaving at midnight or 1 a.m, but they're really quickly getting like right onto Barnett Shoals, I guess my question is, do we care? In the same way that we cared in the AR zones, those sort of quieter country roads. So I guess I just want to pose that as, is because it's so unique, do we need to address it or talk about it?
Mr. Griffin, I guess that question probably is going to you. I have some comments, and they are directly related to some of the things that Sarah is highlighting.
Did you want me to address that?
Well, yeah, I just generally wanted to pose it, and not as a way to impede anything. I also like this project, and kind of have similar sentiments that somebody said earlier. Like, I would like to help figure out a way for something like this to happen, but I just am sort of bringing up our conversations around the ag event facilities and in the AR zones, just wondering.
I think the difference here probably is that, when you all were working on the special event facility regulations in the AR, you were trying to create a way so as to allow people to do that with not a lot of regulatory oversight. It make it easier for that to occur if you followed certain rules. By going through this plan development process, this is a very regulatory process that will go through 2 full reviews. It will be locked down, and basically we're asking the applicant here, tell us everything about what you're going to do, and if we see fit that it is appropriate, we will approve it, and that's what you're allowed to do in this specific location only. Really does not set any type of precedent for any other location in the community.
Okay. Are there other comments?
Ms. Morales has her hand up.
Ms. Morales?
I guess I think maybe I kind of get where Sarah's going with that, though. I remember a discussion we had in the past where we're talking about an event facility in an AR zone, and with the idea that you're moving out to the country, you kind of get this country peace and quiet, and when there's an event happening, you may not be getting that. So does that mean that if you're living in town, there's this expectation that, oh, it's going to be noisy on Saturday nights because they're having a wedding a few hundred yards away? And that's I'm not saying that it's going to keep me from voting against this. I guess it's just a concern that could come up in terms of putting a use like this adjacent to a neighborhood. And but then again, I live in a place adjacent to the Taylor Grady house, and we hear events there, and it's just part of the fabric of the neighborhood. So I think this might be a case where, depending on what we hear back from the neighbors about it, is just part of the decision-making process, I guess. But I think I might be picking up what you're putting down in terms of like the effect on the larger neighborhood with an event facility, that kind of thing.
Any other comments? I have a few questions, I think. They may be questions or they may be comments, I'm not sure. I went to this site today, and so there 2 or 3 things came from going to the site that were questions for me. One of the things I was interested in trying to see for myself was how what was written here about parking would really work. And I'm still not sure. I guess in the field and on the street, basically, is how I'm reading this. And so maybe I need to stop and get the answer to that. But let me just add on to it. You can get to a place there where you can't get out. And so I think there, in fact, I did today. As I was circling through, suddenly I was at a total dead end and had to pull into an undeveloped area and back out. And I'm sorry, I don't know the name of the street. Shane could probably tell us. But it's a total dead end. And so maybe those are the places that Shane is talking about putting a gate of some nature, but the perpendicular to that is the main road in. You turn to the right to get on this, and it's not like right there. You have to go a pretty good way. So then you would be putting up a gate kind of to stop people from turning to the right there. You're putting a gate up in the middle of the subdivision. So I didn't quite know how that would work. So maybe Josh, if you could help me know about that. Sorry, I can't name the street. Maybe I can look and you probably know. So can you help me with that? Does the gate have something to do with that, and where would the gate be? And
so the gate wouldn't interrupt any traffic flow for the neighborhood outside of the farm parcel. The gates only would be at the perimeter parcel at the 2 points of entry that would ultimately keep people out during non-event times or people that weren't part of the farm operations in general.
Okay, so then let me just kind of pursue that a little further. Then, so the parking is in the pasture or on the street, and if people are on that street, somebody could tell me the name of it. Then you dead end. If you happen to turn right, then you really are dead ended. And I don't know what they do with backed up traffic that can't get out of there.
And I don't know if Aaron can pull up a site plan. We can reference that. But I think I'm not quite sure where the dead end is, to be honest with you. That's part of the intent of the turnaround at the top of the private drive. So
what's the name of the main street in?
So this street is Decal Drive, and outside the street, you probably can't see mine.
Does Decal Drive dead end into Edgewater? Is that where?
So that street comes down and then wraps around, and I believe and again, I'm sorry, you can't see my cursor. I wonder if I can you annotate in WebEx? Hold on just a minute. I might be able to. Oh, that's on your screen, Brad. But Lakewood Decal Drive does come down and end up coming into Edgewater, if that's a question. I believe I'm getting that correct.
And so when you dead end into Edgewater, you can go right and you can go left. Left is out, right is to a total dead end. But there are a number of houses before you get to the dead end. I'm just saying how, I don't know, maybe security, maybe whatever can help people, but I think we can't let people get to Edgewater, take a right, and suddenly we've got 50 cars all bottlenecked down there at the dead end.
Understood. Yeah. And so if people left the event facility, this kind of comes back to Kristen's question and comment earlier about the two drives and how would they work for some of the larger crowds. I think I see where you're going, that if you were to exit onto Edgewater and you didn't know where you were going, you could ultimately end at a dead end.
Yes.
And I think that's one of the things we need to look at is how do we direct people so that they exit onto Decal Drive so that they can turn and go back down to Barnett Shoals.
Okay, then I have a question about Indiana. I'm assuming that people would be directed down Decal and on Edgewater, if I'm calling those streets correctly. No, that's not. By the barn is where you would go out. The street strangely fixed. Indiana comes in from one direction and it curves to the right and it curves to the left. But those are small homes in there, and they are right at the barn, and they are narrow streets. So is that a problem? I'll talk about sound in a minute. I'm still on traffic.
I think it is something that we can certainly work with the applicant. The connection from Edgewater up into Indiana was a requirement of the original plan development years ago for multiple points of ingress and egress. Mm-hmm. There wasn't an event facility proposed at that point. It was just additional residential. So I think that will be important for the applicant as part of their master submittal to address what is their plan for exiting traffic, especially so as to not have an event end and you're putting numerous cars up into the neighborhood on small streets. I think they should be directed out to Decal Drive, ultimately to Barnett Shoals as well. And perhaps they can provide more information with their master submittal on that.
Okay, then that is just an issue I think has to be addressed. So parking and routing of traffic, especially at Indiana and especially at the dead end on Edgewater, I think are two difficult places. Now, let me talk a minute about sound, because the houses are totally next door to the event venue. So maybe my question is, are the events low-key events? Are they performance events? Or what kind of events, are we talking about? And I think even weddings can be noisy. So how are we? I don't have to have an answer now. In the PD, I think we've got to have some, otherwise we're going to have the folks on Indiana sitting in the planning commission room asking us how in the world we could have allowed an event next door to their house. So I think we got to know something about sound there. If we could, that's got to be addressed in a way that we're comfortable answering the neighbors as well as the applicant. All right, just one more minute. Going back to Kristen's question, Sarah's question, and then Kristen's, both of them. I'm not opposed to this plan by any means. In fact, that's why I'm trying to be as thorough as I can be with what I think is going to cause some issues, because those are the issues that will keep it from passing when it gets to the point of being passed. But if our ordinance says that there are no animals in a CN zone, I'm asking the same question as Sarah. So are you simply saying then that the applicant's just going to take the chance it's going to be up or down when it gets to the mayor and commission? They're going to do it, and then it's going to be up or down. Is that what we're really saying?
I think that's basically typically the nature of a planned development, that, you know, they're wanting to keep it as a commercial neighborhood zone, but ask for the addition of that agricultural component as part of their specific planned development proposal on this property. Yes.
Okay. All right. So then I do want to close with, it is a really interesting idea. And I think it's set back on the property that would allow it to do some things that that you couldn't do like that in another place. So I hope that we can get the answers to the parking and phasing and sound and tiny little Indiana when we get the PD back. I think that's everything I have. All right. With that said, then we will move to the second application, which is I've laid these out so I could get to them quickly, which is a preliminary plan development at 2015 West Broad Street, case number PD 2020-02-697. And this is to rezone a portion of the property there from commercial general and single family residential to a commercial general plan development. And so we are ready to move forward with staff.
Okay, again, this is at 2015 West Broad Street, PD 2020-02-697. It's from traditional neighborhood to general business, and also from commercial general and RS8 single family residential to commercial general plan development. There are 3 special use permits in mixed density district located at 190, 192, and 194 Highland Park Drive. Site map showing the subject properties containing the triplex. The parcel is 0.38 of an acre and zoned mixed density dwelling RM1. North, south, and west are multifamily dwellings, all zoned RM1 for mixed density. To the east, there is an existing duplex zoned RS8 RM limited, which is single family residential, mixed density residential limited overlay. Here's an aerial photograph of the parcel. And from a different angle. And yet again. The request is for 3 special use permits for an existing triplex to be allowed to continue as existing halfway houses. Under section 9.
I think you've got the wrong information up there. I think that sounds like it's coming from a different special use permit.
Oh, sorry.
I would take it from your screen.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
One undeveloped parcel of 0.67 acres with a billboard. Proposed subdivision for a separate single-family RS8 parcel. Rezoning the rest of the property from CG and RS8 to CG-PD. There's a commercial general plan development. Waiver request for a minimum FAR and conserved tree canopy. From traditional neighborhood to general business. Proposed quick vehicle service. And a binding application report and plans and elevations have been provided. Here's the future development on the left. And then future development is on the right. Existing zoning and the proposed zoning on the right is CG plan development. Here's a site plan. It looks like this is the elevations. Staff comments, it's unnecessary elimination of existing tree canopy due to excessive front yard setback. The designated corridor purpose is to restrict auto-oriented uses. Adjoining residential neighborhood and street. Other comments are the driveway design, plaza area location, parking location, and billboard easement. And again, here's the site plan, and thus concludes staff's report.
All right. Thank you. And so now, do we have people in the Daugherty Street Auditorium who would like to speak to this plan?
Madam Chair, this is Bob Smith. I'm representing the landowner.
I'm sorry, I skipped you. Go right ahead.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you very much. My name is Bob Smith with Smith Planning Group, and I'm here tonight representing Ken and Annette Diaz, and I believe Ken is there in the Daugherty Street Auditorium, and he'll address you a little bit later. It occurred to me when we started working on this project that our firm has actually looked at this site for a variety of uses over the past 15 years or so. And all of the uses actually required a PD due to the constraints that are present on the site. We're also very cognizant of the responsibility to protect the Kalima Avenue neighborhood. This particular use represents a small footprint use that extends the minimum amount possible along Kalima Avenue. Instead of proposing to rezone the entire 3/4 acre portion, almost 3/4 acre portion of the tract that is not already zoned CG, we're proposing to rezone on what is necessary to accommodate the proposed use, leaving enough of the parcel to create a residential lot under the existing RS8 zone. Unfortunately, when we consider the small lot size and small footprint of the building against the level 2 corridor requirements along this section of West Broad Street, it becomes clear that we need to ask for some waivers to the code. Regarding the future land use plan, all of the subject parcel does not require a change in the plan. Currently, about 6,000 square feet along the Broad Street frontage is currently zone CG and has a future land use designation of general business. The request will require an area of slightly over a half acre to be changed to general business on the future land use plan. Now, I don't want to ignore the elephant in the room. The proposed use is a quick oil change service store. It is an auto-centric use. It's even so auto-centered that you don't even get out of your car in this particular vendor's building. But given the context of where we are along this corridor, auto-centric uses are contemplated by the zoning code and allowed within the corridor designation. This is a level 2 corridor which allows for auto-centric drive-through uses. Drive-through restaurants and other drive-through uses are allowed along this stretch of West Broad Street. Steak and Shake is just next door. It has a drive-through. The advantages of the proposed use is that it really doesn't generate that much traffic as compared to other uses allowed by right in the CG zone. It won't have a call box, and the hours of operation do not extend into the evening hours. We're also confronted with FAR requirements. We are requesting a reduction in the floor area ratio from 0.15 to 0.1. This translates into a total reduction of building area of a little less than 1,500 square feet. In this particular case, I'm personally not too concerned about the reduction because of the balance we're trying to strike with Kalima Avenue. The proposed use has a very small footprint, a requirement of only 5 parking spaces, and will only generate about 120 vehicles per day. In contrast, if the full FAR requirement of about 4,400 square feet was constructed and the proposed use was retail, 15 parking spaces would be required. Larger stormwater facilities would be necessary, and the project would necessarily extend further down Kalima Avenue. Retail uses of this size would also generate approximately 250 vehicles per day. If the proposed use was a restaurant, the impact would be even greater, not to mention the impact on the existing local businesses in the area. Regarding the staff recommendations contained on page 6 of the staff report, we'll work with the planning staff to see if we can come to a resolution of some of their comments, particularly the comments related to the corridor requirements and restrictions on this particular use. If you look at section 925.8J, it states corridors designated as level 1 or level 2 are subject to additional building mass standards in order to encourage pedestrian accessibility and to reinforce the relationship between the built environment and the adjacent major transportation corridors. In contrast, on page 7 of the staff report, it states, quote, "The proposed use is on a corridor designated for the purpose of restricting such auto-oriented use," end quote. The proposed use is allowed in the CG zone and along this corridor type. So we need to work with staff to figure out where the more restrictive interpretation is coming from. Now, just to clarify, Kalima Avenue is the only vehicular access to the site. Since the subject site is a corner lot, GDOT will not allow direct access to the site from West Broad Street. The possibility, though, of a right-in, left-out driveway onto Kalima is a great idea and something I'm sure we can accomplish with the Transportation and Public Works Department. And one last item. Item number 5 on page 7 of the report states that the plaza must be relocated to meet a requirement that it be contiguous, a contiguous connection between the street, that would be West Broad Street, and the primary building entrance. We would like your input about providing a smaller plaza in front of the building and a larger plaza constructed along the frontage with Kalima Avenue. It will be an asset to the neighborhood and I think help mitigate the impact of the development along the Kalima Avenue frontage. So we've got some housekeeping items to take care of, and we plan to work with the planning staff to meet some of the design requirements they are suggesting. I thank you for your input tonight, and I'll be happy to answer any questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Sorry, I almost left you out. Okay, then I think now we are ready to hear who are in the Daugherty Street Auditorium.
Hello, good evening. My name is Antoine Givens. I reside at 215 Kalima Avenue. My occupation is an educator in Gwinnett County. I would like to read the email that I sent to the planning department earlier. Reviewing the proposed plans, I would like to point out the driveway for the oil change facility. I believe the driveway will be more appropriate off West Broad for the sake of safety and reduced traffic congestion. The proposed driveway is a high concern because of the existing traffic. Congestion is already an issue with customer parking for nearby businesses. According to the proposed Take 5 plans, traffic congestion will increase. For example, if a car is heading east towards downtown, turns right onto Kalima Avenue, and quickly turns right into the proposed area, which may cause a trailing car to quickly rear end the entering car or T-bone the exiting car from the oil change facility. The Take 5 franchise is all about fast oil changes that will result in a constant flow of in and out traffic. The constant flow of the in and out traffic with the proposed driveway will risk the safety of not only Kalama Avenue homeowners, but also Take 5 customers and sidewalk patrons. Relocating the driveway further down is not a favorable option either, because of the driveway being most likely relocated directly in front of a homeowner. A potential solution would be to propose a shared driveway with Steak and Shake that customers for both businesses can utilize the traffic light. Therefore, traffic can safely enter and exit both businesses while reducing traffic congestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbons. Do we have another comment from someone in the auditorium? Mr. Dias.
Yes, my name is Ken Dias. I am really the owner of the property along with my wife. I look at this property as part of the revitalization of Broad Street. I think we all know that it's coming. So the question really becomes, in that particular site, what is the best thing to put there? I mean, I've been approached by plenty of people to put different things there. I said, no. I'm a lifelong resident of Athens. I played and grew up in the Kalama area and know everyone on that street, except maybe I know Mr. Gibbons. I probably know everyone on that street, and a lot of them are my clients. I think that the impact of this area, of this particular land, would be on Mrs. Jeannie Marshall. She lived directly across the street at 151 Kalama Avenue. I have spoken with Mr. Marshall. The property is owned by Mr. Marshall. Mrs. Marshall, she's up in age. She was my babysitter when I was a kid. Her husband, Mr. Marshall, now Yancy, and the property is owned by her grandson that lives in Atlanta. I've spoken with all of them. They have absolutely no problem with the design. I had meetings earlier with people in the community, maybe 5 months ago before the virus came up at Red Lobster. The other people in the community that came up did not have a problem with the plan. The other thing about traffic, you already have food for the soul there, the restaurant. I've spoken with the owner, I know him, I represent him, trying to assist him. His chance of staying at that site is probably slim and none, because he has a small restaurant area, and he is not going to be able to meet the distancing requirements whenever he's allowed to reopen. By the time he reopens and so forth, and maybe get custom back in about 2 years from now, he will be out of business. So he right now think about looking for another place so he can reopen. But the point here being is that the food for the soul creates traffic. So you take the food from the soul traffic away, there's not going to be any more cars coming in then than there's now. It's been proven that the people that utilize food for the soul parking on that lot, they did not go down Kalama Street. They put right onto Broad Street and Kalama and went onto Broad Street. So I don't see what a trafficking idea says it's going to create that additional traffic. I don't think that's going to be the case. So I have looked at the property several ways. You know, one time I tried to put a building on the property, houses on the property. Because of the topo of the property, it would cost $150,000, $175,000 backfill that property, because Clarke County has a setback line. So if you set the houses back, then you got to backfill the property. So it's not feasible financially to build any houses on that property. And secondly, I live on Temple Road. Who's on a house beside a racetrack? That's what I call Temple Road. Okay. All right. So those are the things that I wanted to mention. But sooner or later, something coming there. So I told Mr. Gibbons, what do you want to take? Do you want to take a Red Lobster? You want to take a fast food place or whatever? We're really going to be there at night. This place is going to close at 5 o'clock. It's going to be done. It's not going to be open on Sundays. So what do you want to check? I'm trying to give you the best option, the best business that I can give you that will have the least impact upon the couple of houses across the street. But it will not impact the bottom part of Kalama House. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there other, is there anyone else there who wants to make a comment? All right, hearing none, then we'll come behind the rail and hear from Planning Commission members. Does anyone have a comment?
Ms. Morales?
Hey, so I have a few notes that I've been making. I'm glad, Mr. Smith, that you talked about the plaza and the seating, because looking at the plan, I thought that was a really weird placement, especially if the idea is to split the lot next door into a residential lot. So I would like to see that plaza moved. I think it would be a better asset if it were moved closer to Broad. I was also a little concerned about the placement of the trash receptacle. Again, if that's supposed to be a residential lot next door, I mean, I guess, there's some restrictions as far as like where I'm not an expert in parking lots, so I'll leave that to y'all, but it was just a red flag to me as far as the placement and where a potential house might be next door. And I guess, there's been some talk about the business itself. It wouldn't be open in the evenings, but I'm assuming it would probably be open on Saturdays. So there would be some weekend traffic going into the business. And one thing I thought was interesting, the note about how it's on a corner lot, and so GDOT wouldn't allow an entrance off of like directly onto Broad Street. But I think it's interesting that Steak and Shake is also on a corner lot, and yet they ended up with a stoplight in front of them. So, which I guess they built that before the stoplight was even made. So I was curious. I don't know. I just thought that was something to point out. I'm sure there's some other backstory to that, but that's, I think that's the extent of my notes that actually, I was curious in general what the restrictions were on the Billboard Easement, and kind of how that changed planning a lot. So that's all I had.
So perhaps could someone answer Ms. Morales' question about the Billboard Easement?
I'm going to defer to Mr. Smith on that.
Yes, the Billboard Easement is actually quite restrictive in that we're going to have to be careful not to actually obstruct the view of the billboard from West Broad Street. So that's one reason why the building is pulled back even with the billboard, so that there would be no obstruction there. And I've got a copy of the easement that I do need to sit down with planning staff and let's discuss kind of the implications of the easement versus the plan, because the easement actually pre-exists particularly the tree management plan, and there's going to have to be some adjustments to the tree management plan in order to adhere to that easement. So that's something that we've yet really to figure out, and it just came to light actually yesterday.
Thank you very much. That's helpful in light of some other questions that may be asked based on the report. Anyone else? Yes, Ms. Kinman.
Yes, thank you. I mean, this is obviously a difficult piece of property. It is right on Broad Street and also right on Kalama. So I'm real familiar with it. I guess the question that I would have to maybe both Mr. Smith and the planning staff, one of our commenters suggested that there may be an access through the Steak and Shake property. You would love people to be able to access this from Broad Street and not from Kalima. So tell me what we know about that.
I mean, from a staff standpoint, I have not investigated to look into that. I don't recall that when Steak and Shake was built, that there was cross access built into it. That would be on the side of the drive-through window. And so from a design standpoint, I am not clear on that, or if it was something that was even looked into. I mean, certainly from an advantage standpoint for the oil quick lube facility to have access to a traffic light would be advantageous, but I don't know if that's something that Bob could address further or not, but it's just something I would have to look into before the master.
Mr. Smith, can you add anything to those comments?
Well, I can a little bit. We did the Steak and Shake project, and we actually contemplated a drive in front of Steak and Shake, an access drive, if you will, and accessing this site. And of course, we have two different property owners, and eventually that just simply didn't happen because that access drive would actually have to be two ways. And right now, as Brad mentioned, the drive is one way coming from the drive-through, right? So actually, in order to access this site, you would have to go all the way around Steak and Shake, and I think go through their dumpster in order to access the site, or go through the drive-in window lane and then take a hard right. So now I think that's just a bridge too far. I think that opportunity has been lost, unfortunately.
I just wanted to add as a follow-up, thank you for saying unfortunately, because I think these are opportunities that we continue to lose without these cross-parcel accesses that would solve the problem that Mr. Dice is having with this property. I'll just add that I'm going to have a hard time with this, with the access only on Kalima. I know the area, I know the corner. I can see how it could work. But it's got to be very, very neighborhood friendly. And I agree with what Kristen was saying. And you mentioned, Bob, maybe moving the plaza closer to Broad Street makes it feel a little bit more like a turn into a neighborhood. But I really want this property to be developed in a way that is at the highest and best use. And it's a difficult one. So, I'll stop there.
Thank you, Ms. Kinman. Does someone else have comments?
I think Mr. Scarborough is waving at us.
I am. Thank you.
I see half the people, so I'm counting on you, Brad.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, my major concern with this was the driveway onto Kalima, but it sounds like no matter what goes in here, that's going to be the access to the property, barring some sort of, until we all get flying cars, we're going to have to drive in from Kalima. So I'm interested to hear that the neighbors across the street, when I looked at the driveway, I said, that's right into the house opposite. And it sounds like they don't have an objection to it, which I find encouraging. I know that you could go down Kalima and eventually make your way to Baxter Street. So, but probably not many people would do that. So, but I would encourage them to look at the right in, left out nature of this, or at least a way to encourage people to not penetrate further into the neighborhood as a shortcut of sorts to a different way out. So, but that was all I had to say. I did want to, I'm looking at the map here concerning the dumpster issue in the house next door. The dumpster seems to be, and Mr. Smith may be able to comment, the dumpster seems to be 60 feet from the property line. So it may not be, and there is a fence along that property line, I understand. So there may not be as big of an issue as we think. So, and that's all I have.
Thank you. Other comments?
Mrs. Beresford?
I was wondering if somebody on staff could explain to me, I don't really understand the billboard easement issue with this property. Is the easement associated with the property from a long time ago? And does the billboard easement sort of trump Like, so did I hear somebody say earlier that the building can't, is it that the billboard can't cover the building or vice versa? Or what? I guess I just want to learn a little more about billboard easements and how that impacts this.
I mean, from a staff perspective, the billboard easement is agreement between the billboard company that has the board on the ground and the property owner. It is not, if there, and I'm not familiar with the exact language in this easement, and I can tell you that board's been there for a long, long time. But, if the easement were to be violated, or if a use came along that was of such nature that it was beneficial to the owner, to eliminate the agreement with the billboard company, I don't know if that can happen or not. It depends on their, private negotiation and agreements from a business standpoint. But the easement is really a regulatory restriction on Mr. Dias and the property. It's not something that we just from a development standard standpoint that we would regulate.
Yeah, that makes sense. And all I would add is I'm just sitting here thinking about, this property just looks really impossible to me. And the limitations when it comes to access and the billboard. At the very least, I definitely agree with the earlier comments about, a right in, left out only driveway, if that's how that has to be. But yeah, it's a tough one. So I guess I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. Other comments?
Mr. Anderson?
Yes, I'd like to just point out that it seems to me that access to this property from Broad Street would lead to more trouble rather than solving trouble. Going to an actual side street will give you a little bit of protection from getting rear-ended. Going to a direct entry off of Broad Street would be courting disaster. But I do agree that it would be nice if the building could be closer to Broad Street.
Thank you. Other comments?
Mr. Hall?
Yeah, I don't have anything unique to add. I just wanted to, in the spirit of giving the applicant more feedback, I wanted to echo what Alice in particular said, that, I think this development really has to be neighborhood friendly. I appreciate the resident, Mr. Givens' comments. I do tend to agree with Jim that a driveway directly onto Broad actually probably increases the risk of accidents given the speed of traffic coming through there. But I think, so I think Kalima's probably the only option. But when this comes back to us, my feelings on it, which are still, being informed by all of these comments, are going to depend on the degree to which it's neighborhood friendly, because I'm very familiar with that neighborhood, and I do want to ensure that this does not adversely affect it.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Other comments? If there are none, I have a couple, and they have been said, but I just wanted to reiterate. My number one question that I was going to ask had to do with the pulling it forward. And so I guess I've heard, based on the billboard easement and whatever, that is difficult. I do think if there was any way they could turn off of West Broad at the light, right there at Steak and Shake, that would be great. I guess I would like to hear Mr. Smith, at least some discussion about when you come back, about what really prohibits that. And I think you, based on what you said, you may have it all already, but I would just feel better if we heard something about that. And then the other thing, I too, like Mr. Hall and Ms. Kinman, this has got to be resident neighborhood friendly. There are 4 houses that look straight into the side of that property, and nice houses that I know people have invested their savings, as we all do, in where we live. And it would be very difficult for me to just ignore the fact that 4 homes would have to look into a bay of an auto place. However, I do understand that there are other things that can happen, so that might not be as good. But at any rate, I'm really compelled by the fact of where it's located in relation to the neighborhood. So I guess that's really all I need to say about it. Any other comments?
I see none.
If not, we thank you all very much for being here, and we'll move on to the third preliminary plan development at 594 Oconee Street. Case number PD 2020-02-693, and the purpose of this is to rezone a single parcel that is currently split zoned as commercial general and RM2 with a special permit. So if staff could present this to us, we would be great.
All right, and I promise no superfluous notes on this one. 504 Oconee Street, PD 2020-02-693, from a special use in the commercial general and residential mixed density airport overlay to commercial general plan development and residential mixed density in the airport overlay planned development. Here's a location map. Notice that red line, and underneath that, that's the airport overlay. Here's an aerial photograph. Your development is general business and mixed density residential. We have the existing zoning and the proposed zoning, which is the CG plan development, RM2 airport. Request is a plan development to allow a lot to be subdivided within the airport overlay zone to be less than 1 acre in order to, 1, renovate the vacant Oconee Street schoolhouse into office space with limited facade changes, 2, construct 2 new multifamily dwellings, a duplex, 2 3-bedroom units, and 1 4-bedroom. Compatible with the underlying zoning categories of commercial. No change to the future land use categories of general business and mixed density residential. The request includes several requested waivers of zoning tree management standards. The elevations, the front, rear of the school and the annex building along South Poplar, the rear of the school along South Poplar, or the annex building along South. Here's the site plan. Here's the elevation of the 4-bedroom unit. And the elevations for the duplex. Recommendation, received with comments. The purpose of the preliminary plan development review is to provide an opportunity for the Planning Commission to comment on the project prior to the preparation of the master development plan, as you know. Staff recommendations: 1, the master plan development submittal should include phasing, which ensures that the former school is renovated prior to permit issuance for residential dwellings. 2, applicant should coordinate with ACC Arborist in order to solidify waiver requests. 3, proposed parcel sizes should be denoted in application materials. 4, a screening buffer should be provided per section 9-15-3. Again, here is the site plan, and thus concludes staff's report.
Thank you very much. Our applicant, Mr. Smith, are you making this presentation?
It's actually Ed Lane, if you can hear me.
We can, yes. Thank you.
Great. Good evening, everyone. My name is.
Sorry.
What's that?
Would you like me to keep this on? I know you have some slides.
Yeah, you can keep that there for now. I'll let you know if we need to cycle through.
Okay, thanks.
But yeah, my name is Ed Lane with Smith Planning Group. I live at 1171 Keeneland Drive, and I will be presenting for this project tonight. And thank you all for accommodating us with this mid-month Planning Commission meeting. Really appreciate that. So, as I understand, many of you are probably familiar with this parcel and the previous plan that was submitted back in 2017. And so, I really do think that what's presented before you now offers some significant improvements to that plan that was previously approved. And this includes, I think, a better alignment of land use, building use with the underlying zoning and the future land uses for this area, as well as a little bit better transition between the CG and the RM portions of this neighborhood. And third, just a little more recognition of the historical character of the parcel. And so I would like to run through some of staff's comments just to provide a little bit of context and response to those. So in regard to the phasing, the intent here is to develop this all at once, all as one phase. But I think I do take their point in that because the parcels will be subdivided, we will have separate permits, separate construction permits, separate certificate of occupancies that will be sought. And so we will show a phasing line in the master submittal. But the intent is here to develop both at once, since they share parking, they share, solid waste and recycling facilities, and they really need to be done at the same time. In regards to the waivers, there was a significant number of waivers we had to request, and many of those are waivers that were already in place with the previous binding site plan. And so those remain. And then we had, several additional just to make the two uses work, and a lot of them related to the tree management. So with staff's comments, I'm pretty confident that we can work with planning staff and the arborist to clarify some of those elements on our plan and take care of that. With the exception of one that we just need to get a little clarification from planning, but the note about the screening buffer on the southern boundary, which if you're looking at the plan right now, it would be Plan West. That's the southern boundary. That's a RM zoned parcel, RM use, and the adjacent parcel to that, in fact, the three next parcels are all owned by the same LLC, and they are all multifamily homes. And so, our understanding there of the code was that because it's the same zone, same use, we did not need to have that buffer there, that screening. And we would be glad to do it for the back portion of that, of the depth of the lot, but we are unable to do the full buffer if for some reason we had to for where the building is, because we're about 7 feet away from the edge of the property, and that's, with all the various other site constraints, that's about as really as far as we can go. So maybe staff can clarify that. But I did want to mention, although it's not an item in the report, I wanted to talk about traffic briefly, as that may be a concern of some of the neighbors. You'll note we are showing a marginal increase in the traffic counts. Of course, the bulk of it on account of the office space in the schoolhouse. That's a lot of square footage, and so that generated those increased traffic numbers. However, just want to mention two things. One, this project, proposes a right-of-way increase with a new sidewalk along South Poplar Street that should make that much safer for pedestrians walking there, as well as kind of crowding the street with trees to help slow down that traffic. And finally, where that in and out traffic would happen is right at the corner of Oconee and South Poplar. So all of that in and out traffic, increase in traffic happens at that corner that has the church, has some other commercial uses, and gets higher intensity traffic anyway. So we don't have the typical concern of, through traffic, or if someone's exiting the site that they'll, turn down a residential street to get a shortcut. Those concerns don't really apply here. And last thing, Aaron, if you could cycle through on the slide very quickly. So this is the site plan that is currently submitted. Since we submitted this application package, the design team, got together and I think came up with some significant improvements that we could make to the layout on the RM portion of this project. And Aaron, if you could cycle through. So, I wanted to, if you could at all just give us your feedback on this layout. I know the other application is what's really before you, but because this is what we intend to come back with on the master. And the reason is with the shared parking, I think it makes a little more sense to put that in between the two uses. Second, having the two housing units kind of facing the street like that with kind of a normal yard between them, I think further helps to transition into the more residential character of the neighborhood behind that. And so it's just a more aesthetic kind of layout of engaging the street and splitting that parking out. And third, we did just a rough sizing on the solid waste demand for these two units plus the office. And we believe that with some tip carts, some kind of larger tip carts and a cart corral, we could get rid of the kind of more commercial dumpster, which the concern would be, there are some residential neighbors. And with a dump truck, picking that up and slamming it down, I think if we go with a lower grade kind of residential trash and recycling pickup, it's more sensitive to those neighbors. So what you see here is, unless we hear otherwise, what we hope to come back to you with on the master submittal. And with that, if y'all have any questions, I do have Gabe Comstock with Art Collab here. If y'all have any architectural questions, he should be able to answer those. But I give it back to you all.
We have people in the, am I on? Yes, I'm on. Do we have people in the auditorium who would like to speak to this application?
There's no one left in the auditorium.
All right, then we'll come behind the rail and hear from planning commissioners. Anyone have a comment?
Mr. Scarborough?
For staff that sort of relate to the airport overlay. Do you, Kim, and this may be a question for us too before we see this again. How much of this property, what portion of an acre is actually within the airport overlay? Does it have more than an acre already? And are we subdividing? In other words, could you create a 1 acre lot within the airport overlay, or is there just not enough land there under that? And what could be, how many bedrooms could you put on that piece of property, or how many were planned under the old PD?
None. None.
Say again?
The density under the old PD, I'll have to get that for you. I don't know that I've got that in front of me. The entirety of the property right now is about 1.6 acres. If you remember on one of the original plans that was submitted, just about the bottom 2/3 of the lot that is to be created is within the airport overlay. So
right,
you're probably getting well up into the annex if you tried to get to an acre.
Yeah.
Jeff, are you asking, ask your question again. I'm not sure it's been answered.
Well, the requirement is you can't create a lot smaller than an acre in the airport overlay, as I understand it. But it doesn't sound like it's possible.
I'm sorry, you asked if in the old PD.
No, I'm asking about how much of this property is within the airport overlay district. Because it sounds to me like it's less than an acre.
I believe you're correct.
So you can't create a 1 acre lot in the airport overlay zone here.
I mean,
you couldn't subdivide it.
Yeah, the way the lot's set up, any lot that is within any portion of that lot in the district, the lot in its entirety would have to be at least an acre. I think to get that to happen, you're getting way up into the annex and maybe even to the schoolhouse itself in order to subdivide something that large.
Okay, that's kind of what I was getting at. I did have one other comment regarding the phasing and the permitting. Rather than require the school portion to be completed before permitting the houses, can we restrict the issuance of a certificate of occupancy for the two multifamily dwellings until the school is completed? That lets them continue on. You don't have to finish one before you start the other, but it does ensure that the school is completed before the back part of it becomes useful. So is that something that we can stipulate? And if so, that's my suggestion.
I think we can certainly look into that. It gets a little more sticky from a standpoint that we may very well at that point have two separate owners, and one owner is going to be upset because he can't control the actions of the other owner to get finished. But in lieu of requiring completion of the building, certainly our concern with it is we don't want the lot to be subdivided, the two houses built, and nothing ever happened with the school and it continue to fall into disrepair. And that's certainly not what's being proposed here. But when you get into a situation with two separate owners, it becomes much more difficult for us to regulate.
Right. So I would, yeah, because I would like to see exactly what you're talking about. It happen the way it's intended to happen, the way the applicant stated that it would happen. So, but give him a little more freedom to work on both projects at once. So that was my goal behind that. So, and that was really my only comment. I don't have, I remember seeing the project before, and this doesn't seem to me to be all that different from what we saw before. So, that's all I've got.
Thank you. Any other comments, Mr. Hull?
Thank you. Yes, I guess my question is directed for the applicant. It goes to the question of shared parking and the path in between the parking area on the RM2 zoned portion and the schoolhouse. How's that supposed to work if these two parcels come under separate ownership, which I understand to be the plan? Do you contemplate easements, or how exactly is that going to be managed? Or is it, effectively, is it the case that the 16 parking spots that I see on the RM2 portion are going to be for the housing that's built on that portion?
Sure. So yeah, during our understanding would be that during the permitting phase, we would have to show, before we could get a plan approval, a recorded shared parking agreement between the two parcels filed at the courthouse. Probably also controlling egress and the shared solid waste and recycling facilities, all of that. I mean, that's something we have done on many other projects that are not a PD. So the planning department would have assurance of that being taken care of with the document at the courthouse. And as far as between the two owners, I know, that there's 10 bedrooms, so the multifamily is probably going to want dedicated, 10 spaces for themselves. Whether that gets marked as, reserved has not been discussed. But then the balance of the parking would be for the the office. And one item, just to answer what came up before, the current binding site plan had 38 beds, and we're down to 10 on this application. Just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, and that actually brings me to my second question. I'm wondering is the 10, when I looked at on Q Public and measured out what the RM2 portion, it came out at about 0.6 of an acre, but I couldn't tell looking at your site plan if it's only part of that will actually be subdivided into the housing portion of this proposal. And 0.6 of an acre in RM2 would equate to about 14 bedrooms. So I'm wondering, is 10 the maximum that would be allowed given the acreage of the RM2 portion, or are you proposing to build less than what's allowed there?
So I actually I'm not sure on the answer to that directly, partially because I think the actual acreage of how that lot will be split, we were proposing it as shown kind of straight down the middle there, but I'm not sure how that relates to the density. However, the 10-bedroom count is almost, where we are on density is almost not what constrained us. It was parking. Because even if we add one more bed, we cannot fit another parking space on either of these parcels. And of course, the schoolhouse has a set square footage with the required parking for that. And so that kind of dictated everything was meeting the amount of parking needed for the schoolhouse, and then whatever's left, that's how many beds we could have.
Any other questions? Other question, Ms. Kinman?
Thank you. Not exactly a question, but a comment. I feel like we've been zooming around my old commission district tonight. I have to say that this is another one of those projects that I'm really looking forward to supporting. I think that that the petitioner has. Here's what I want to say. The fact that we have office in front is I think a wonderful idea. Years ago, you looked at that property and you didn't understand why it wasn't high-end office. The views out the back. It's just a beautiful place for nice office space close to downtown, but tucked into a little bit of a neighborhood. I appreciate the questions about the access to the multifamily structures and back. And I think we've gotten some pretty good answers. But again, I'm kind of zooming out. I think that this is a really good use for this property. I will mute myself now.
Mr. Anderson?
Anyone else?
Mr. Anderson has his hand up.
Mr. Anderson.
Jeff Scarborough raised. Essentially, you're saying that at present, this qualifies under the airport overlay rules because it's 1.6 acres. But if in fact the property is divided between two owners, doesn't that usually have to be done by platting it separately, and then we might run afoul of that rule again?
That's actually one of the things that they are pursuing through the PD is the creation of a lot that's less than the 1 acre as a waiver to the development standards.
Other questions?
Mr. Scanlon?
I think this is a better use than the last iteration that we saw. I really was never tremendously pleased with the student housing. I was a little dismayed though when I think I read that there was no consultation with the key building in the neighborhood of the church across the street. And I think that would be really helpful to see some really good neighbor input into this whole process. That's all.
Thank you. Other comments?
Ms. Rowland?
Okay, you got me. One thing everybody said a lot of things that I would have said anyway, but one thing that I'm real pleased to hear about is the next site plan we're going to see is going to have the parking with its residential structures changed, and to remove that dumpster. There is nothing worse than being in a single-family neighborhood and having to listen to the dumpsters being dumped, especially right next door to you or right across the street or something like that. And so I think that's a real plus that this plan is already starting to move forward. And I do think that it's a vast improvement over what we had last time. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Rowland. Other comments?
Ms. Morales?
Hey, yeah, I just wanted to address that last edit to the plan that we saw at the end of the presentation. And it actually addressed the question I had, which was the relationship of the one lot and its houses to the rest of the project. And it was one of those where if the rest of the street is houses, how do all of those relate? And I do appreciate moving that parking lot, because now we can just full on have the street of houses and then the parking lot that connects the two buildings, and that way it provides some definition and we don't have to pretend that one is related to the other. So yeah, I like that change, so thank you.
Thank you. Other comments?
I believe Ms. Beresford had her hand up. I don't know if she still has one or not.
Sarah?
Nope, I'm good. Thank you.
Other comments? Well, I have some. So let me kind of see where I can start. I guess I want to start by saying that I was thrilled that the school building would be an office building. I too had thought forever that it was a great place to have an office building prior to the last PD that we approved. And so I'm really, really pleased with that. However, I have some concerns. We've mentioned several times tonight when there are a lot of waivers, it's an alert. And so for this project, 9 waivers is a huge alert to me. And as I look at them, we talked about one earlier where there were a number of waivers, but we were trying to accomplish one thing within that context. I think that many of the waivers here are because we're trying to do 2 things on one lot, after which we're going to, I assume, make it 2 lots. We've all talked about that all night. Unless I skipped it, I read this pretty carefully. I didn't see that in here, but I think we all know that it's going to be split at some point in time. I would have preferred to have it say that straight out than us just talk around it, assuming that's what's going to happen. But the waivers that are being requested in this are not about little bitty things. They're about the size of lots. They're about going less than 1 acre. They're about parking jammed up against property lines. They're about conserved tree canopy. They're talked about removing street trees. They're talking about, I mean, they're big things, allowable parking spaces, minimum landscape areas. They're not tiny little things. They're 9 big important things. Now, I know that some of those we certainly approved in the last PD, but in the last PD, there was one development happened. One thing. Here, the developers have chosen to try to do 2 things. And doing 2 things, the determination to do 2 things, has created the need for many waivers. And I think that's a significant issue. I do want to say that, this is Maxine straight out, but I feel really strongly about developments talking with neighbors. That can be church people, but there are a lot of people that live around there and a lot of people that own houses there, whether they're rented there or not. And there need to be some conversations with people about that. So I want to say that I would not be able to vote for this at all unless we ensure that the school building, we know that the school building will be completed. There's a preservation issue. This is the oldest extant school building in Athens. And we have a responsibility to try to protect that building. And, let's face it, they're probably not doing all this for the school building. They're doing all of this to get the residential in the back. And I would hope that getting the building finished would be priority, but you never know. So that will have to be definitive for me. I want to talk a little bit about the residential buildings that are being built there. The property, as you all know, that whole area has gone through, I don't even know what we would call it, but those were single family owner-owned houses. Many of them are still owner-owned, lived-in houses. And so I would like for, if we have to put residences there, I think we could solve a lot of problems if we didn't put residences there. But if we have to put residences there, they need to look like the single family houses that are there. That's not going to make a developer a ton of money. I understand that. But there are other responsibilities that we have in addition to being able to make enough money to do the job. I think there are ways to build homes in areas like that area that could have 4 bedrooms in it, and the one right across the street, I've been in it a million times. A house, not the monstrosity that should never have been built there, but the other one, the next door to that, that's the house that's been there forever. It has 4 bedrooms. So you want 4 bedrooms, then build the house so that it looks like the neighborhood, not so that it looks like what we put up for students to live in. The look of what we put up in Athens for students to live in. So how those buildings, those residences are built is critical to me if we have to do that. I have a question about the listing on the historic register. In the application, it says there is a facade that the listing with the Department of Interior, or you didn't say that, but with the historic register information, requires only a facade for you to not make changes in the facade. I was under the impression that the historic register included all components of the building. So can you clarify that for me? This would be the school.
This is Gabe Comstock with Architectural Collaborative, if it's okay if I speak.
Absolutely.
So the facade easement is held through the Georgia Trust.
Correct, and I have a copy of it, so I've read it. I know a lot about that. But what about the Department of Interior?
I don't. It is not tied to the interiors, as far as I know. I'll have to double check that to confirm. But I will say that we are doing this project in the hopes that it will be a tax credit project. So we are. I mean, as our firm always does, we are doing all new elements, and rehabilitation work will be done under those guidelines, whether or not they get the tax credits or not.
Does the facade easement allow you to get tax credits for that building, or does it have to be on the Department of Interior's historic register?
As far as I know, they're independent. I'll have to ask my partner, Joe Smith, who is our guru, but they're independent. But you really don't have to get, you don't necessarily get tax credits if you do the easement, but you have to do the easement no matter what. So the facade will be protected no matter what. And like I said, the owner who is of this potential project is Grell Construction. They've been they have full intentions of protecting as much of the interior fabric of this building as possible. And that's been our whole approach on the interiors as well. So.
Okay. Then I want to speak to traffic. As you all have responded to questions about traffic, it's all been related to South Poplar, Oconee Street, South Poplar. And that wouldn't be a problem because you could funnel it down. The problem is Little Oconee Street. So can you tell me how you're going to manage the traffic coming down to get to the new residential housing and exiting that whole parking lot? Those folks going to want to go up Little Oconee Street. Well, you can't park people on both sides of Little Oconee Street now and get up the street. So how are we going to manage the traffic for Little Oconee Street?
So I'm not sure. So Little Oconee Street, my understanding is the little short section that tees into South Poplar.
Correct. That exits onto Oconee Street at the top of the hill. Correct.
Okay. So there, with the 10 beds that are being added to the RM portion, that there will of course be an increase in traffic. I guess my point is that given if you look at the density of that neighborhood, the other size lots, the vast majority of the lots are a lot less than an acre size, and so with the 10 beds that are being added here, my point is, I guess, just it's a very marginal increase in traffic when you would split that over, an hour, and, those 10 people that would be in and out of there. It is close to the bus line and close to campus and all of that, but there's no way about it. It's an increase. It's just a marginal increase, and then an improvement in the pedestrian safety along South Poplar. But Little Oconee is, it's narrow. It has that very narrow frontage, and we didn't bring that into the scope, I guess, of any proposed improvements as it's. I guess we view it as off-site and off the frontage of the project.
Absolutely. I wasn't inferring that should have been brought into the scope of the actual work that you're doing there, but it ought to be in the scope of what that does for traffic in the area, because it's the closest street to that parking. And people fly down that hill now. Wait until they have 10 more bedrooms to fly into. So I think, and there's no, we're assuming that anyone who leaves the school will turn left. Well, they won't necessarily, because there are only 2 or 3 car lengths till they get to a light. I assume you're going to put a light back there. I don't know, but at any rate, there for years was a light there. It's been removed. I assume you might put a light back there. I don't know. But at any rate, you only got 2 or 3 cars to get out. So I don't think it's a logical assumption to say that no one who went to a business office would never turn right and go up Little Oconee Street, because they would, because they got free access to get out at the top of the hill. So that Little Oconee Street is, I think, critical in the way you look at traffic. I hope that when you bring it back, you will have the trees placed. I'm not big on let's finish it and then see where we can put a tree. We weren't allowed to do that across the street. When that building burned, I think the arborist needs to be a critical part of doing this. So those are just some issues. I guess succinctly, I'm not thrilled with the additional housing in the back. But if I have to live with that, I can only live with it if you make it look more like what the neighborhood looks like, not 2 giant kinds of things, which is how I see what's there now. And I think that's fair to the neighborhood. All righty. I thank you. Any other comments? I'll be sure I say.
Sarah, I do have a couple comments that I was having a hard time figuring out how to say. And actually, Maxine, you touched on, I have a lot of ambivalence about this project, even though I love the idea of I like what's planned for the school itself. I think that I want to agree with the people who have said that they have a problem with this quantity of waivers. And particularly when it comes to the trees, for sure, I have a problem with that. And I think that what I was sort of struggling with is the idea that we're being asked to consider these parcels in total as if they were one. And we're being asked to consider these waivers looking at the whole thing, knowing full well that it's not going to be looked at as a whole thing when the residential piece gets sold. And so I don't know my precise feedback on that point, but I'm aware of it and I'm uncomfortable about it. And I think that the spirit of some of these rules that are being asked to be waived in this PD is to preserve tree canopy and do some things on a site-by-site or parcel-by-parcel basis. And so there's something about this that feels a little bit like it's skirting around the rules a little bit. And I still think that what the applicant wants to do with this is possible. I just would ask that you really look closely and figure out how to not ask for so many waivers, how to do some things that don't ask us to look at the whole thing with the intention that it's actually not going to be one whole thing eventually. I think that's probably the best way to say what I was thinking.
Thank you, Sarah. I had 2 more things. One is I want to reiterate talking to the neighborhood. But the second thing is a minor thing. Nothing else I've said I consider minor. Let me reiterate that. Everything I've said I think is major. To me, it's major. But this is minor. But between the annex building and the school building, now there's a canopy. I don't know how you're going to handle that or what you're going to do with that. but it's a nice area, and I see no landscaping. So I hope that when we get the plan back, that's a lovely area to landscape and would connect those two buildings. And so I hope there will be some landscaping on the PD that we can see what you're going to do. It's almost a plaza area. So it would be a nice area to do something with. I hope you will do something. Any other comments? All right. With that said, I thank you very much. And I think that takes care of all of our applications. We have just some quick pieces of business. Our first is to hear reports from our subcommittees. Our housing subcommittee is going to share, both of these reports are just some kind of quick reports, and we'll have, I think both subcommittees will have stronger reports in, I don't mean stronger, we'll have more of a report in June, but we want people to know that we are meeting and that we are doing some things, and we want to keep people abreast with what we're doing. So, Mr. Hall, would you share about housing?
Yes, ma'am. So the Housing Committee has met every 2 weeks since early March. The first order of business was addressing the question of accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, which raise a whole bunch of different issues. And we've talked through, I think now, all of those issues, although there may be dozens more that we'll think of later. But for the moment, we're working up a written report from our committee to the whole Planning Commission, with the idea that it will prompt additional discussion and ultimately will be incorporated into the Planning Commission's report to the Mayor and Commission. It explains sort of, the questions we addressed, the conclusions we reached, and why, and it compares some peer cities that have been through this process already in previous years and the decisions they made, and compare some of those decisions to what we're tentatively proposing. And we're going to continue to meet every 2 weeks going forward as our work continues on other aspects of the affordable housing issues.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Ms. Rowland, would you share about your subcommittee? Ms. Rowland?
It's on now.
Okay, good.
The land use subcommittee has not been meeting, and one of the reasons is our next program had been to meet with 2 engineering firms to have them discuss with us as a subcommittee their point of view when it comes to the mass grading ordinance and to other environmental ordinances that the mayor gave us in the charge. That is due, according to what Brad told me, we're due to start that on the 4th Thursday of this month, and we will meet with those 2 gentlemen at that time. And that's all I've got.
That's great. Thank you very much. I think Brad's got that all ready for us, so that's wonderful. All right. I don't have anything further in terms of my report. Mr. Griffin, do you have anything?
I see Miss Morales has her hand up. I didn't know if you wanted to recognize her first.
That'd be great. I can't see her. I've got to figure out how to be able to see everybody.
Sorry, I'm hiding from you.
I know, you and several others.
I was just curious, as far as the subcommittee meetings went, since we're doing them online, what is the mechanism for advertising them to the public, and how do we kind of make people aware of what's going on?
Okay, it's a good question. I'm happy to answer that one, as has the Housing Subcommittee been doing up to this point. When we put the ads on our website and on the government calendar, we provide information that it will be a virtual meeting. If you are interested in attending the meeting, we have them contact planning staff, and staff then gets their information, and we're able to basically invite them into the WebEx meeting with very clear understanding that you are there as a non-participant. You're there to listen. You are not as you would be if we were meeting in a regular room. You're invited in to hear, but it's not a back and forth conversation, and that information is provided to the public.
Thank you. Did that answer your question, Ms. Morales?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Brad, report?
I have virtually no report other than just to thank you all for being flexible. Y'all are getting pretty good at this. The items seem to take a little longer. I am contemplating whether we go 2 meetings next month or try to do it all in one night. And so I'll have more information to you, but I thought this went very well, and just thank you all for your support of us trying to work through this.
Thank you. We appreciate your help, and everybody did great. My only glitch is not being able to see everybody, so we're going to figure that one out before. But Brad, you were great. You helped really well. So I think the meetings certainly have gone well. What I want to be sure is that people know that they're happening and know that if they have input, how to do in the input. So that's my only. I'm all in favor of us doing it this way, but I really want people to know. So we try to at least pass the word as much as we can. All right.
A quick question about scheduling. This is for Brad. If we have, if are the two options for how the next meeting would go to be either we have one meeting on our regular planning commission meeting night, or we would have 2 meetings where the first one of them is that night?
Yes.
Okay, great.
That's a good question.
If we split our schedule again, we'll do it the same way we did this month, first and second Thursday. It's a lot of work for you. It's an additional night commitment for you all. And, we're getting a little better with this. We have now dealt with, how to handle people that show up in the auditorium. I thought that went really well. We're limited in our number of how many we can get in there and not make them stand outside, but we can get about 18 people in there safely and spaced. So we'll just see how it goes the rest of the month, and I'll make that decision probably. I've got to make it soon. We're halfway through the month now, but probably in the next week or so, and I'll let you all know.
But Sarah, were you asking if it's first Thursday and second Thursday, or is it first Thursday and some other Thursday? Is that what you were asking?
Well, I was just generally kind of getting at when the earliest the next meeting would be, and it sounds like the earliest would be our regular night, and then if they decide that we need to split it into 2 meetings, it would be that night and then 1 week later.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
All right, that's great. All right, thank you all very much. Have a safe trip home. That was a joke. You can laugh. Enjoy yourself, and thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.